Numbers don't lie, right? For me, it's just revenue. At the end of the day, if my idea makes the most money, no one's going to say anything to me. I don't know. I thought I was like a personality hire or something.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan Peterman here with another episode of the podcast. Today we have a guest who went from a new grad at Google all the way to staff by the age of 28. He did it very fast. He has a lot to say about how to get promoted in Google's culture and how to work with your manager. But I think the thing that was most interesting to me about him was that he's the first person who ever told me that he wishes the opportunities for promotion to staff came later in his career. And he explains why that's the case. If that sounds interesting to you, let's get into the conversation. Ricky, welcome to the pod. So today I wanted to go over a bit about your career. I know you were at Google pretty much your entire time. So you did an internship at Google, you committed full time, and you went from junior all the way to staff in your 20s. And I just felt like there's a lot to learn from that. So I want to lay that all out today.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here, and I hope that this podcast is very helpful to everyone else.
Can you walk me through the overall arc of your career? Can you just lay it all out? I'm kind of curious about the compensation and also how fast you got all the promos at Google.
I started as a new grad in 2017, and around then I was making 180K, and I had some sign-on bonus, and I think that's pretty normal for a new grad offer from Google. And then after that, I got promoted in a year and a half to level 4, or what we call like a mid-level engineer. And at that point, my compensation was around 250K, which is again about average for an L4. And a year and a half after that, I got promoted to L5. So I made it from 3 to 5 in 3 years. That's very fast. I got very lucky, very fortunate with my team. On average, I would say it would take maybe like 4 or 5 years to get that done. So I did it, maybe a year and a half or 2 years faster than average. So at level 5, my compensation was 350K, which is again about average. It was a little bit higher because of my initial stock grant. And then 3 years after that, I got promoted from 5 to 6, so from senior to staff level. And at the staff level, my compensation was around 500, or it currently is around 520, maybe more, but it's around there. And again, that's also pretty average. I think these numbers really align with what you see on levels.fyi, so hopefully it's no surprise to anyone.
So let's go into the first one, that junior to mid-level promo. You said you did it in a year and a half at Google. What did you learn along the way? Can you tell us more about the ratings that you got and also a little bit more about the process? Maybe we can start with the ratings.
Yeah, Google does ratings on a 6-month cycle. So the very first half, I got meets expectation, which is pretty normal for anyone who's only worked there for 6 months. And then after that, I exceeded expectations. And then after that, I got the promo with the level higher than that. I was really nervous about going for this promotion just because it was like really ahead of schedule. So I was really unsure at the time if I was going to get it. I definitely had all the attributes I felt like for the next level in terms of my impact and how well I was doing at work. But I just wasn't sure if my tenure would support that. And I was a little bit worried being docked about that. But luckily, my manager was supportive, helped put me up for promotion, and I ended up getting it.
It sounded like you knew about it. Is it initiated by the employee or the manager at Google?
At Google, it should be definitely initiated by the employee. I would say, though, more than anything, it should be an ongoing conversation between you and your manager. Just making sure expectations are set of when you plan on going for promotion, what projects you're working on, and what's going to move you to the next level. I was asking my manager, hey, do you feel like these projects that I'm currently doing are for the next level? And making sure my own expectations were set, making sure the projects I were doing were indeed for the next level.
I see. So you were fully aware that the promo was happening and you were managing up throughout the whole process.
Yeah, definitely. I fully support managing your manager. I think it's something that you have to do if you want an accelerated promotion timeline.
What was it that you did that actually made the difference at this level?
I think just being able to have independence and finish projects on your own is really the hallmark of what people are looking for when you're getting promoted from 3 to 4 or junior to mid-level, that you just don't need that much hand-holding. You can unblock yourself on your own.
Is there anything that you did that helped you unblock yourself? Anything you'd recommend for someone that is junior to become more independent on the project?
I would say what helped me the most was just asking a lot of questions. I think a lot of people, when they first start, because of imposter syndrome, they don't want to seem dumb. And I didn't want to either. But I kept telling myself, and I kept reminding myself, hey, I'd rather ask questions and look dumb and learn something, and maybe I'll get fired because people think I'm dumb, than to do nothing, not learn anything, not ask any questions, and get fired. I really tried to overcome my imposter syndrome with that mindset. And I think that's what helped me learn a lot from others. Because in general, a lot of people are really willing to help, really wanting you to succeed and grow. So through that, I was able to learn how to do things on my own and move my projects forward by asking people questions rather than asking my manager to figure it out for me.
You don't want to ask too quick because then you don't learn anything and someone just gives you the answer.
Yeah.
But you also don't want to block for too long because you're just going to be sitting there and not learning anything, and it's not productive. Especially when I had interns or people who are new to the industry, I feel like you should reach out if you spend more than half a day on something. If you spend 4 hours on something and you make no progress, nothing's going to change. You might even want to reach out sooner than that. But of course, you want to give it a good try before you ask the questions.
Yeah, 100%. And I think definitely if you're asking the same question multiple times, then it's maybe a red flag. If you get stuck after working a while and you ask the question, that's totally fine. It's normal and expected.
Definitely. Yeah, there's got to be this upward trajectory. If your diffs, they constantly get tons of feedback and that doesn't change after months of work on the same code base, something's off there. But it's totally okay if there's the iterations are coming down. There's a lot of questions, but it's getting better over time. Yeah. That's ideal growth. So you got that promo, pretty straightforward. Honestly, in the industry, that promo is just a matter of churning out code and just doing it more independently. So it makes sense. That is like aligns with what I think as well. Let's talk about the senior promo. I think, in this promo, there's a little bit more change in your behaviors, and it's not just shipping more code. So I want to dig into that. For you, what did you feel was the biggest shift in how you were going about your work that helped you get promoted to senior at Google?
I think the biggest shift is probably just taking more and more ownership and getting to a point where I could confidently say I owned a certain scope or certain area. And the buzzword is the go-to person for a scope of area. So I was able to get to that point by really understanding a portion of the code base and pushing out a lot of projects that had a lot of impact in that special area.
Was that something that you explicitly planned? Like you maybe with your manager, you thought, okay, that area, there's not a good owner yet. I'm going to go into that area. Or how did you become the go-to person?
I think I got pretty lucky on this. So I work in ads, and the scope of area that I chose to invest more time in, the ads just didn't look that pretty, and I wanted to make it better. And by making it better, I was able to also have a lot of impact. So I just picked kind of the most interesting scope of area that I kind of dipped my toes a little bit into, and I just kept working on it, and I continued to find it interesting, and slowly became more of an owner by doing more and more projects and taking my time to explore that area.
I think some people, depending on the team structure, they have to compete for scope or they worry about that. So in your case, you didn't run into anything like that. Is that right?
Yes. My team is a little bit special because we usually pick our own projects. Of course, you can still have projects handed down by your manager, or your manager can help you pick projects. But I really made an effort to find my own projects, making sure that they had reasonable impact, because I feel like the best projects that you can find are the ones you find yourself. Because your manager might not always give you a project that's at the next level. So I really looked for projects that were at the next level, had big impact, pushed my boundaries, and put me outside of my comfort zone, so I had to learn and improve my technical skills too.
One of the most important parts of getting promoted is getting some next level scope to actually execute on. How did you know that the things you were looking at were at the next levels? How did you find those? Was there some tech lead that you were discussing things with, or did you do it more by yourself?
I think what I did is I looked around my team and looked at how other people might have gotten promoted to senior and tried to understand, this is what exactly a senior level or L5 project looked like. and thinking about how I could create something or find something of that same scope or complexity. And then after that, I took my ideas to my manager and asked him for feedback, asking him, hey, do you feel like this is next level of complexity? Do you feel like this is a reasonable place that I can push the boundary on? And that's also kind of how I set myself up for success to get a promotion really early, because a year before I actually got promoted, I went to my manager and I said, hey, these are all the things that I think are interesting that I'm kind of working on. And here's a roadmap for the next year of what I'm planning on doing. Do you feel like this is enough for the next level? So already a year before my promotion, I did my best to set expectations with him in terms of what I'm doing and if it's at the next level or not.
So that was after, so right after you got your promo to the mid-level, you put together that roadmap and you showed it to him. Is that right?
So after I got promoted from 3 to 4, I had about 6 months where I was just like trying out different projects, seeing what was interesting to me, and slowly like figuring out what my L5 scope looked like. And then I put together that 1 year roadmap by myself and then showed it to my manager and got my manager's buy-in.
Got it. Okay. And so as you were going along and executing on this roadmap, I mean, inevitably at work, like things come up, people might want to give you work that is not on that roadmap, or I don't know, there's some partner asks that come in. What did you do in that case? How did you handle it when work was not at the next level, but someone was asking you to do it?
I think you just have to learn how to say no. Obviously, if it's a bug that you caused and someone's bringing it to you, you better fix it because, you know, it's your bug. Or like if it's your scope of area and someone finds a bug, you should still fix it. But if it's a whole new project that someone else wants to take you on, maybe it is like the next level scope and you do think that is a good project and you work on it. But most of the time, I feel like people will just kind of like see who might want a project or who's interested in a project, and you have to decide for yourself, hey, is this at the next level or not? Do I have time for this? And I said no to a lot of projects that I felt like were not at the next level. Sure, they might have impact, but they weren't going to help me grow.
Do you have any tips for people to say no? Because I think a lot of people, they don't feel comfortable, especially if the work's coming from their manager. What's the right way to say no without causing issues?
If it's someone else giving you work and you don't want to do it, I would escalate to your manager immediately and be like, hey, this person's giving me work. I don't want to do it. Like, why is it being handed to me? And trying to understand, like, oh, maybe it is just like a bug that you caused, so you do have to fix it. And if it's work given to you by your manager, I think I would just try to push them and be like, hey, is this something I have to do? I have my own projects here that I feel like would have more impact and also help me grow more. Can I just do these projects instead? And I think a manager's job, and this is coming from someone who is a manager, is to find projects that help you grow and succeed and projects that you actually want to do. Because otherwise, people might give you a project and you're forced to do it, you're just going to do a crappy job on it. So it's better for a manager to find a project that their reports actually want to do. So hopefully your manager's not giving you projects that you don't want to do.
Makes sense. So it sounds like you had pretty good managers throughout this process. Seems like they were pretty receptive to what you were saying.
Yeah, I think I just built up, like very early on, this ability to find my own projects and have impact. My manager, I felt, was not too worried about the projects I was doing and just trusted that I'd find my own projects to push on. Obviously, he still gave me a lot of feedback to help guide me and help me understand, oh, these type of projects might be good or bad for me. But for the most part, my ideas were bottom up rather than top down. And I think that's one of the ways that I was able to succeed and get promoted really quickly.
That makes sense. You talked about knowing which ideas are impactful and which ones aren't. How did you develop that skill?
I think maybe the first thing you have to do is figure out what exactly impact means within your org. For me, I was in ads, so it just meant like how much money is this going to make? Does it actually help the user, help the advertiser, help the publisher? But if you were on a different team, maybe it's like increasing the number of daily active users or interactions with a certain product. So really thinking about what exactly that impact number meant. So again, for me, it was revenue, and I was able to find projects by running a lot of experiments to figure out, oh, here there's a gap where I can probably have a lot of impact and drive a lot of revenue. Here's another gap that I found where I can probably drive a lot of revenue here too. And I think the best part about this is that numbers don't lie, right? For me, it's just revenue. Other people might have ideas, but at the end of the day, if my idea makes the most money, no one's going to say anything to me.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. There are metrics and are projects with well-known milestones that the whole org knows is valuable. So when you move those metrics, obviously revenue and ads, yeah, that there no one can argue. If you have the biggest metric movement, let's say you're a junior engineer that moves it more than the whole team, like okay, obviously that's going to be something huge. Okay, so when it actually got to the senior promo, what was that like?
I would say that from 3 to 4, it was a little bit scary, but then from 4 to 5, it was even scarier because I knew I was
Why is
really
that?
going against the grain. Like, I was getting promoted really fast. It's a really expedited timeline. I heard that like the average time that it takes to get promoted can be like 2.5 years, 3 years, 3.5 years. So doing it at 1.5 years was really, really aggressive. And I was just worried that I'd be docked points for not showing that I was performing at the next level for an extended amount of time. So I knew it was a pretty big stretch. Luckily, my manager still supported me and said that we can go for promotion, though like he set my expectations. He was like, I'm not sure. Like we'll really have to see. Again, you might be docked, but let's just try to go for it and see what happens. So I did end up going for it. I was able to make it. It was a really big surprise to me. Very fortunate that my manager supported me, even though it was a very aggressive timeline.
One last thing on this level is for senior promo, you need to lead a bit more than in the past levels. Is there anything that you did that some people there's like growing pains to like becoming like a leader on your team? Like how was that experience for you? Did you have imposter syndrome at any point?
It definitely was a little bit scary. And as you said, growing pains, it takes some time to get used to almost being confident in yourself. For example, like I had some project ideas that I ultimately handed off to more junior engineers, but I was pretty anxious that they wouldn't pan out or that the experiments that I gave them wouldn't do so well. And honestly, some of them didn't, but I think my batting average was still higher than most people, and that definitely helped. But you definitely have to get used to leading and just being comfortable mentoring people. And I think in buzzwords, you would say you'd have influence on others in their projects.
Let's go into the staff promo. I think it's natural for promos to take longer later in your career. Did you feel stuck at any point?
Honestly, I wish I could have stayed at the senior level a little bit longer. I feel like being a senior engineer, you of course, don't make as much as if you're a staff or a higher level engineer, but you have great work-life balance. Like, I really miss taking a nap at like 2 p.m. or going to the gym at 3 p.m. when there's no one there. And I think as you become more senior, you're just involved in a lot of bigger projects that require more meetings, and the structure of your schedule just becomes more and more rigid. So I think for people that do want to go to staff, really think about, is this something you actually want? Like looking at how other staff engineers are on your team or on adjacent teams and looking at what they are doing.
And at Google, do they have a up or out policy? So you can stay at senior as long as you want. Is that right?
Yes, I think maybe you can even stay at mid-level as long as you want, but I'm not 100% sure. There's
Okay.
no expectation for people to go to staff. I think becoming a staff engineer is very much a choice, that to go past senior, go to staff, because it is a lot more responsibility and a lot more work, and I think some people just don't want to make that trade-off.
If you were to take you at the senior level versus you at the staff level, what's the biggest difference in your mind?
I feel like at level 5, or as I was a senior, I definitely started owning a space. I had a scope that I was like well versed in, and I did a lot of projects and had impact there. And I think what helped me go from senior to staff is now that I really knew a scope of area, how can I push the boundaries of that scope of area, challenge the status quo, and have a larger influence over that scope of area? I think I got a lot of points for leading and pushing the boundary of that area. And through that, I was able to have a lot of impact and just like being a leader in that space rather than someone that just knows the space.
I see. So you were creating scope and influencing across teams.
Yeah, definitely just like both cross functionally, across org. Like it involved a lot of, at some points, like very high leadership buy in. So I think once you start being the one to kind of like make those decisions and like push those decisions up, I think that starts to show very clearly staff level influence.
One of the things to getting a staff is that you need to find that staff level project. And in a lot of cases, the manager can't just hand that to you. That's something that you need to find yourself. How did you find your anchor project that got you promoted to staff?
I think what helped me find my staff project is just working in a space and then being like, why are we doing things this way? This doesn't make sense to me. And then starting to challenge, how we've been doing things for a while. So there's definitely a status quo. And like one specific example is we had a lot of support backed by user research that showed, this one thing to be true, but then when we actually ran the experiments, it conflicted with user research, and I was able to push that and show that, despite what user research shows, we can do this instead to have a lot of impact. So I would say what really helped me have that staff level project is knowing a space so well that I can start to challenge the boundaries or the rules that may have been set up and pushing it towards almost like this new frontier for a specific scope.
And I think we talked a little bit about influence and how important it is for staff. How do you usually go about influencing other people?
I think at work, I just kind of already established a brand of being someone who was able to find impactful projects or just find impact in general. And then I would kind of pitch my ideas to other people. Obviously not trying to step on anyone's toes, but just giving ideas and collaborating with others. And I think a lot of people trusted my ideas at that point, and they also panned out really well, fortunately. So I think that's how I kind of established influence with other teams or cross-functional partners, just building a relationship, cross-pollinating ideas with other people, and ultimately getting those ideas to become projects and ultimately succeed and launch.
You had been at the company for a while, and you had already evidence of past results that gave you credibility. And so that made it so that you could influence people a lot more easily. Is that right?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. If your projects keep flunking, then people might not be as willing to try out your projects or trust your word as much.
That makes sense. I think that's one thing that is unique about your career compared to a lot of our friends is that you have been at Google since we graduated. You've been in the same org the entire time. So all those people know you. They've seen you as this rising star that has been having a lot of success on all these projects. And so it's just natural that you're probably going to be more influential than if you got hired at the senior level on this team. You have to build all of that credibility from scratch.
Yeah, I don't want to say rising star, but I definitely, had some successful projects that I think were able to showcase that, my word had some value or some truth behind it.
Yeah. The rising star would be just like that you've had past success.
Yeah.
And you've had past success.
Yeah.
You're believable. You're credible.
Yes, exactly.
They see your name and they're like, okay, this project's probably be a good idea. For the staff level, you were TLM for some time as well. Can you talk a little bit about, why did you want to try management in the first place? I think that's like a common thing that everyone's thinking as an IC. They want to make that decision for themselves at some point. So how did you make that decision? Why did you want to try management?
I wanted to try management just because I think I already had a lot of fulfillment in helping people grow, finding projects. Even though I wasn't directly managing people, there are definitely mentees I had at work. I also mentored interns at times, and it was just a really fun time watching them succeed. And it's almost like having a kid and watching them grow. And I really enjoyed that. So that's ultimately why I wanted to try out being a manager. Luckily, my team was also very supportive of that idea, and I started managing around 2 years ago.
That makes sense. Did your manager really vet your motivations for wanting to become a manager before you became one? How did that process go?
I don't know. Honestly, I pitched the idea to my manager. I think even once I was at the senior level for a while, I think I kind of said, hey, like eventually one day I'd like to become a manager. And I think just the right opportunity came up. I do feel like becoming a manager really early on was a little bit awkward just because at times felt like I wasn't mature enough to be a manager.
When you say not mature enough, what does that mean?
I think I felt a little bit awkward at times. One example is like being in a meeting of a bunch of managers, and I think a lot of the managers in our org skewed to be a little bit older, just naturally, because some of them were even like higher level managers and have been managers for a while. So it felt a little bit awkward there. Another time it felt awkward is like when I'm out at a music festival and I'm really drunk and then I see my reports out there. I think at the end of the day it's probably fine, but I think I just didn't really think that would happen until it actually happened.
That makes sense. And before you came, had you done interns or any? Did you have any management experience, or did you just kind of ask your manager and he was like, okay, maybe one day, and it just happened?
Yeah, I did not have like any special managing experience. I never had an intern. I was a little bit surprised. For some reason, I thought that there'd be more of like a textbook on how to be a great manager, but I feel like a lot of people just kind of get thrown in and then they do their best. I'm not saying that Google doesn't have resources. Google has tons of resources, but I don't know. I thought there'd be a little bit more structure, but it seems like in general, people just become a manager.
When you became a manager, what do you feel was the biggest difference between being an IC and manager?
I think what a lot of people told me before I became a manager, and I agree with their advice even today, is that when you're just like a TL, you have all the fun parts. You get to help them grow, you get to help them succeed, and then all the harder parts is like giving difficult feedback when people are not performing so well, and a lot of almost the busy work of writing reviews and like going to calibration sessions. So there's just a lot more, I guess, overhead when you're a manager as opposed to being an IC. But I do feel like at the same time, it's a little bit more rewarding when you actually get to see your reports get promoted because you are their manager, right? You help them get promoted as opposed to just being a TL and helping someone get promoted.
Definitely. So now that you've tried it, do you think that you regret becoming a manager?
I would say that I just wish I became a manager later. I think at the time, my team we had like a really odd scenario where we had 20 new hires and I felt like I was helping them all. And I wanted a more formal role. Just so that I would only be responsible for the people that I actually managed, which was 4 people rather than 20 people. So in that sense, like I feel like I was able to have more time back because I only had to really help 4 people. But if I had the choice, I probably would have been a senior engineer, maybe a couple more years, just because I think there's less responsibility and it's less stress. And I think in your early or mid-20s when you want to just relax a little bit more, it's just better to be a senior engineer than to be a staff level engineer or higher.
That's fair. Yeah, and there's a lot more meetings at the staff level, especially as a manager. I feel like it's all meetings. Sometimes,
Yeah, it's definitely a skill that I feel like you have to learn or get used to. Just powering through 6 hours of 8 hours of back-to-back meetings or one-on-ones. Some managers, I think, have all of their meetings in one day. Some of them have it like sprinkled out throughout the week. But in general, as you become more senior, whether or not you are a manager or not a manager at the levels of 6, 7, 8, you're going to have a lot of meetings no matter what, because the influence you have is always going to be through other people, and it's going to be less code that you actually write yourself, whether or not you're an IC or a manager. So for me, at least, I think when I first graduated from college, I was like, oh my God, I want to be a director one day. It's going to be so fun. But I think as I become closer and closer to these high levels, I'm understanding what it actually means. And it means no more random naps at 2 or 3 p.m. whenever I want. It means no going to the gym at, 11 a.m. Obviously, to a certain extent, you can still have doctor appointments in the middle of the day if you have to, but there's definitely less flexibility. And I think if you look at the calendars at work of any of these more senior people, you'll also see, sure, they still only work 9 to 5, but they are working 9 to 5. They are definitely working.
I feel that there's definitely a lot more meetings. I think when I got promoted to staff, I remember my schedule was basically a large chunk meetings 9 to 5. Not entirely 9 to 5, but meetings kind of just like fragment your focus time.
Yeah.
So then every day I would have, you know, fragmented meetings for most of 9 to 5, and then I would start working on my stuff at 5 until like I went to bed. So yeah, I totally agree. It can become a lot. So.
Yeah.
So I guess last thing, you actually go for the promo, of course. Were there any differences between the past promos, or was it pretty straightforward?
I already said that I was unsure from 3 to 4 and 4 to 5. I was also very unsure from 5 to 6, honestly. I definitely had really good ratings. So that was definitely a signal. Like, I had, like, the highest ratings possible for a while already. But I was kind of just unsure, just because I think people have said that going from 5 to 6 is notoriously hard. 3 to 4, 4 to 5, obviously it still takes work, but it's a little bit more straightforward. And people say that going from 5 to 6 is almost like a complete job change in some aspects. So I was pretty worried about it, just because even if you're a superstar senior engineer and you're having tons of impact, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be a great staff engineer. Though I did end up going for a promo. Again, I feel very fortunate, very lucky that my manager was supportive and I was able to get promoted. And it only took me one try, which is I'm also pretty thankful for.
So all of your promos, there was never a miss and try again, miss and try again. It just landed every time.
Yes, but
Wow.
I was very lucky. I was very lucky.
So,
fortunate.
yeah, looking at the whole career, do you think you could do it again, or was a large part of this luck?
I think you definitely have to be a little bit lucky, just because sometimes you might not enjoy the team that you're on, or maybe your manager is just out on paternity or maternity leave, so they can't help you as much, or they can't support your promotion as well. I think where I got lucky was that my team was a product area that I ended up really liking, even though I didn't pick that. I didn't pick my team, but they just matched me there, and I've been on that team for 7 years now. Clearly, I like it to some capacity, and I think my team was also relatively stable. My manager, although I had some like manager shifts, ultimately it was still under the same broader and larger team. So nothing crazy in terms of reorgs or restructuring that might have hindered my career progress. But I will say that luck is like two parts. One of them is the chance of an opportunity actually coming along, right? Sometimes you just have to wait for that, and it might take longer, it might not take as long. I think the second part is being prepared for when that chance actually comes. So just making sure that you're doing your best and doing the right things so that when an opportunity does come along, you can actually take advantage and seize the opportunity.
What percent of your career do you think has been due to your abilities, and what percent do you think was luck?
I would say maybe like half half. Like I'm pretty confident that eventually I would get to senior, and I think that most people will eventually get to senior as long as they are like making sure to grow and putting work in. But maybe if I was on a different team or I just really did not like the stuff I was working on, it might have taken me longer because I'd have to switch teams and then get ramped up in their code stack. So I think I was just really fortunate that things worked out the way they did. But I definitely made sure to put in the effort and was very conscious about the next level and what I had to do to get there.
That makes sense. Yeah, luck is a huge part of it. There could be an engineer that's better than you, but they're, I don't know, the team they're on is like literally just the worst. It's reorging every 6 months. They have no consistent project. And so in that case, of course you can do it. And on the flip side, it sounds like you had a lot of things around it, like a good manager and like the scope to continue to grow. Your product was like impactful and all of that. So that makes sense. One of the last things I want to talk about is, I think we kind of mentioned that out of all of our friends, I think it's a little bit unusual to be at the same company for 7 years, especially in this industry. People are kind of job hopping to try out new things or, get more compensation or whatever. And so what kept you at Google for so long?
Yeah, I think it's really important to ask yourself, I don't know, maybe every 3 months, just ask yourself, hey, am I still enjoying the work that I'm working on? Do I still feel like this team has whatever I want? For me, it was like I really wanted some career growth. I also really wanted to travel a lot. I didn't care as much about what I was working on as long as it wasn't like too boring. So my team, I felt always had those opportunities for me, and that's why I didn't leave. But I think what I often tell people is I just kept asking myself, is the grass greener here or elsewhere? And it was greener on my side of the lawn, so I ended up staying. That doesn't mean that I wasn't thinking about leaving or if I should change teams every so often to make sure that the job was doing as much as it was for me. Of course, there's survivorship bias, right? I'm sure people that did not get promoted as quickly, maybe they just didn't really enjoy the team or didn't enjoy the work, whereas I just had a good matchup.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I think there's pros and cons to staying at the same team. There's this momentum that you get by staying on the same team and the same company. You're like this snowball of organizational context and like the code-based know-how. And after 4 years in the same area, you're not just the go-to person in one area, you're like go-to person in like many areas. And you just become this person that just knows how to get everything done. You have all the relationships. So if you can get lucky with a good, org setup and all of that, there is this benefit to having all that context that can give you unusually fast career growth. On the flip side, of course, you can job hop and try to get promos too. So that it's not black and white. One is better than the other. I guess it's like a counterpoint to. I feel like the common opinion is like you should jump and you should switch, and there is actually some value to staying as long as your situation's good.
Yeah.
Okay, and the last thing I want to know is if you were to talk to that Ricky at the beginning of your career, junior engineer Ricky, just entered the industry, what advice would you give yourself and why?
I think to my younger self, I would just tell him to trust himself a little bit more, because I think for a very long time I just had so much imposter syndrome. I was so anxious that I wasn't gonna do so well. And over time, I like built up that confidence, like through projects, my projects succeeding and working well with others and getting good feedback. But I think I was like really unsure of myself, and I actually feel like I could have done more if I was willing to trust my judgment a little bit more, or have more of almost like audacity to push the boundary and try new things, because I had a lot of ideas that I felt like I maybe waited a little bit too long because, I felt like, oh, am I going to rock the boat too much? But I ended up doing a lot of those projects that did rock the boat, and they were very successful. And I wish I just trust myself a little bit more to do it earlier. So I'd be less anxious and stressed all the time and be fretting less over imposter syndrome in the beginning of my career.
When you say imposter syndrome, was that mostly about your technical skills, or is there something that you learned that made you have less imposter syndrome?
I don't know. I thought I was like a personality high or something. uh, and over time, I realized, obviously, like Google's not going to do that. But I think I was always just a little bit worried because I think during my interviews too for Google, I think I like did okay. I don't feel like I like hit a home run, and the same thing with my internship. I didn't feel like I hit a home run, and I also think at the lower levels, I wasn't really sure how to kind of gauge my performance. And even though I would like bother my manager a lot and be like, "Am I doing okay? Like, are things going well?" And he'd tell me like, "Oh yeah, you're doing fine," I would still like kind of be anxious, like, "Oh, but like, is it enough? Is it just okay, or is it like, am I doing like, am I passing? Is this like a C that I'm doing? Am I like doing an A plus? Like, what's the vibe?" And I think I was just stressing out about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's super natural. Awesome. All right. Well, yeah, I think that's everything. Ricky, is there anything that you want to plug, or where can the audience find you?
Yeah, so on social media, I'm finding Ricky. If you want to watch my content, it's not really tech related. I have to warn you. I feel like I'm in a very different niche than Ryan here. But if you do want to follow me or check out my socials, it's Finding Ricky. And I hope that this podcast was helpful to everyone. And I'm so happy that I could be here today.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much for your time, Ricky.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Hey, Ryan here. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I hope that it was helpful. And if you want to hear more from Ricky, you can go and check him out on YouTube at Finding Ricky. He recently posted a video about a day in the life as a staff engineer at Google. I know it sounds sensational, but actually I think he did a good job in capturing what the day-to-day is like. It's not just flexing big tech perks. It's more about the daily work of a staff engineer and how things kind of become much more different as you have more and more responsibilities. So you can take a look at that. And then two other things that I want to add is, one, thank you so much for the feedback on the first video. I hope that you can see that I took it to heart and the production quality is a little bit better. Still has a long way to go, but look at the background here. I bought a backdrop to make it a little bit nicer, and I'll be using that for future videos. And then the other thing too that I got a lot of feedback on is the jump cuts. And so I tried to get rid of as many of those as possible while still removing filler words and things like that. So you can see that I'm playing with the camera angles. I really appreciate the feedback. And if you have any more, feel free to drop comments on YouTube. I will take a look there and try to make every episode incorporate the feedback that I get. Thanks so much for your time.